guys, what is up? This is going to be the next video in the series on how to astral project. So if you've been watching, so far what we've talked about all just revolves around what we call the direct method. And the direct method, the idea is no lapse in consciousness between your waking state and your projection. So somewhere in the middle there you make this transition, leave your body, and never lose consciousness. And we talked about all the challenges that presents, not an easy thing to do. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the indirect method, and it is a significantly easier method of projecting. It still has one major hurdle that you need to overcome, but in my personal opinion, far easier than learning the direct method. Now that being said, I would highly recommend that you still spend time on the direct method. Still learn to put your body to sleep. Learn to keep your mind awake and reach that void state. Really, the more methods that you've got under your belt, the better chance you're going to have of success, because these methods aren't interchangeable. You use them at different times. And so if you can really become accomplished at more than one, you're really going to raise your success rate. All right, so the indirect method, the difference here is you get rid of all those prerequisites of learning to put your body to sleep and laying there for hours on end. And the reason why is because it's performed immediately upon waking up. So your body's already in that ideal state. Now, the author that I got this from that talks most extensively about this is Michael Raduga, the Russian author of the book The Phase. I've mentioned it before. And again, I highly recommend this book, especially since it's free. I put a link to the PDF in the description down below. And you can buy a physical copy if you're one of those that likes to hold a physical book in your hands. But really, at least check out the PDF. It's a lot of really great information and much more detail than I'm going to be able to go into here. So he's one. The second author who mentions this very briefly, and he doesn't talk about it, he doesn't say indirect method, but he's really essentially describing the techniques or the approach of the indirect method, is Robert Monroe. Now, Robert Monroe, everybody's familiar with him, and his third book, Ultimate Journeys, the third of his trilogy, he makes the comment on one single page that there's a point where he wakes up, and during that transition to wakefulness, he rolls out of body. And the words he uses is, "It was absurdly easy." Now, here's a guy who's been doing this for decades, and maybe he's used this technique before. Maybe he rolls out of body when he wakes up regularly. But the fact that he only recorded that particular technique once in his entire trilogy and said that he had rolled out when waking up, rather than laying down, waiting for the vibrations, and then rolling out, it stuck with me. It had an impact on me. And I thought, if this is a guy who's been doing this for decades and he finds this particular method absurdly easy, then it's definitely worth taking a second look at. And so it gave me the motivation and incentive to actually go out and really try to accomplish this. All right, so the idea with this is that you want to catch your body in that state between between sleeping and waking, kind of opposite of the direct method. So the perfect time to catch this is on a weekend when you're not waking up to an alarm, and think about a time when maybe you've been dreaming and you've had this very slow transition from sleeping to waking. Maybe you're waking up from a dream and it feels very slow and gradual and very controlled and very relaxed. And when you wake up, maybe you're still groggy and you could easily just close your eyes and go back to sleep if you wanted to. That is the perfect state that you'd like to catch, that you can really take advantage of with this technique. Now, if you miss that state, but you can still remain completely still when you wake up and just instinctively, reflexively turn your attention toward projecting, it's possible to put yourself back in that state so that you can project. And it's almost like you've just begun right in the void state. So again, you've bypassed all of that pre-work that's required for the direct method. So how do you do that? How do you learn to just instinctively, reflexively, just try to project when you wake up? Well, I tried a couple of different things, and one of them, which I'll share with you, did not work at all, and the other one did. So the first, I thought, maybe I could just do this through willpower, through intent. So before bed, I would say to myself, in the morning, I am going to just wake up and I'm going to think about projection, immediately focus on projecting. I'm not going to move, and I'm going to get out of body. All right, so I tried this night after night, week after week, and it didn't work. I even wrote down on pieces of paper, 100 times, I will hold completely still when I wake up. I will project when I wake up. I will hold completely still. I will project. And it never failed. I would wake up and immediately I would yawn and stretch and open my eyes and scratch. And then I'd start rolling out of bed. And right at that point, I would say, oh yeah, I was supposed to project. And by that point, it's too late. So I finally gave up on just the willpower alone. And maybe you've got better willpower, more intent than I do, but I just couldn't make that work. So what I found that did work for me is I recorded my own voice saying, remain still and project. Now I took that recording and I turned it into an alarm, and I set that alarm to go off in an earbud in my ear every 2 hours throughout the night. So every 2 hours, I would hear my own voice say, remain still and project. Well, it's really easy when you've got instructions sounding off in your ear to know exactly what you need to do. So every time that would happen, I would immediately just try to project. And let me be clear that waking up to an alarm is not the ideal state you want to be in. In fact, I have never projected when I woke up to an alarm. That transition to wakefulness is too abrupt. You wake up far too completely, and you are too far from that borderland state that you want to be in to actually project. So it works as a training regimen very well, in fact, for me, but I never actually got real projections during these training exercises. So I would wake up and immediately I would put my focus on projecting, keep my eyes closed, remain completely still, and I would give it my all. With all my hard effort, intent, I would just put everything into trying to project, knowing it wasn't going to work, but pretending it was going to. And you really want to do this. You can't do this half-heartedly, because what you're trying to do is build a new habit. You're trying to ingrain this new process in your brain, and half-hearted attempts aren't going to work. You've got to really try. And then after each attempt, you just go back to sleep. You wait for the next alarm to go off, and you try again, giving it your all every time. Doesn't matter if you're tired. Doesn't matter if you feel like it. You give it your all every single time. And what I would relate this to is building muscle memory. All right, so I'm a guitar player. For those of you who play instruments out there, you can relate to this, I'm sure, and maybe there's other sports and things like that that you can relate to this as well. But you do an action enough times, and it becomes a habit for your muscles, and you gain this kind of muscle memory. So when I play the guitar and I'm holding chords, at first, for several months, it was very difficult, and I really had to think about where to put my fingers, and it was a struggle. So months later down the road, my fingers just go there instinctively, and I say, I'm going to play an A chord, and my fingers do it. And I can't even explain how they do it. They just know how to do it, and they do it. So that is the point that you want to get to with this. You want this reflex to kick in almost to the point where you can't even explain how it works, but your body just immediately tries to project during that transition to wakefulness. And if you can build up that reflex and get to the point where you can just instinctively project without being able to explain how you're even doing it, then that is perfect. That is the ideal state. Now, I'm not there yet. Maybe 30% of the time I can catch these transitions. And if you can catch this transition and you're not asleep yet, or not asleep anymore, but you're not awake, it is, as Monroe puts it, absurdly easy. And this will sound incredible, but you can just roll right out of body. It's like you catch the door to the astral still open. It's amazing how easy it is. Now, what if you miss that transition? What if you wake up and you can still hold completely still. You still remain, eyes closed, laying there. You don't move, and you turn your attention to projection, but you missed that transition. Well, at that point, what you're going to do is you want to cycle through techniques to put you back into that borderland state where you can push the door open just a little and squeeze out. All right, so Raduga in his book, he gives a lot of really great examples of techniques that you can do. And the whole idea behind these is that you're going to cycle through them. And the whole idea behind cycling through multiple techniques is that sometimes one technique will work better than another. And it's really a good idea to have multiple techniques to go through in case you're in one of those cases where one works one day and it doesn't work the next day. So then you've got a backup plan. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick 3 or 4 techniques. And there's different categories of techniques. Personally, I find that it works really well to pick at least one from at least each category. Make your categories different. And the reason why is because there may be some times where you really respond to visual type techniques, and other times you may really respond to movement-based techniques. So pick one from each category. And you're going to pick these techniques, you're going to select them the night before, and you are really going to just run through these in your head over and over again. You want to just you want these techniques to become habit, just like this projection. You don't want to have to think about what to do when you wake up. When you wake up, you want it to just come naturally, and you're gonna want to know exactly what to do and exactly which technique comes next, and never just be laying there and wondering what's next, right? So Talking about the different categories. Let's start with visual. So one that I've talked about several times that really just comes naturally for me that works well is seeing through my closed eyelids and my sleeping mask. So what you'll do is you wake up, you focus on projection, and for 3 to 5 seconds, you're going to just intensely just look at the backs of your eyelids, and you're going to try to see through your eyelids with as much effort and intent as you can put into it. And during this process, you're going to try to really relax yourself further, get closer and closer to sleep without slipping into sleep while you try to see through your eyelids. Now, if that starts to work after 3 to 5 seconds, you're going to stick with it. Just keep doing it because you are now you're experiencing something non-physical. And if at any point you experience something non-physical, you keep on proceeding with that action that brought that sensation about. Now, if it doesn't work, you'll move on to the next technique after 3 to 5 seconds. Another example of a visual technique that I've used that works well is seeing remote locations. And it might not be a location I've ever been to, but it's almost as if you're peering through a window at some city street or something. And again, if it becomes not imagined, but you really are seeing these things through your closed eyelids, then stick with it. And if you're not, 3 to 5 seconds passes, you're going to go to the next technique. All right, so next category, let's talk about auditory techniques. So the one I have been successful with more often than any other is really just listening in to internal noise. Now everybody knows what the ringing in your ears sounds like, right? Everybody's got that. Now, if I just intensely listen to that ringing, I can hear multiple layers of ringing. I can hear different tones of ringing in my ears. And if I listen a little closer, sometimes I can hear like a low rumble in the bass in the background, almost like a muscle car gunning its engine. And if I listen closer, sometimes I can hear the periodic psst, psst, pulsating rushes of energy that always turn into the vibrations. Now, if in 3 to 5 seconds, or at any point through this rotation of techniques, if I can hear that pulsating static, I'm going to stick with that because I've, through experience, learned that that pulsating static turns into the vibrations. Vibrations allow me to project, and then I'm set. If 3 to 5 seconds pass and I don't hear anything non-physical, I will move to the next technique. So other techniques, auditory type techniques I've never actually personally been successful with, but I've read other people have used, is listening to music. So immediately try to hear music in your ears or in your head. And if that sensation becomes not imagined and you really are hearing this music, stick with it. Same thing with hearing conversations, hearing people call your name. If at any point you are convinced that that's a real sound that you're really hearing with your physical ears, then stick with that. Otherwise, you move on and try another technique. All right, so the next one, now these are the ones that are the most successful for me because I tend to respond very well to motion-based techniques. So movement and motion-based. I've already talked about the roller coaster. You know, I've mentioned that many times. I really like the roller coaster technique where I picture myself going in loops backwards, and if at any point I feel that twinge feeling in the back of my head that I've mentioned, that I always feel before the vibrations start, then I will continue doing these loops with my roller coaster. If that doesn't work after 3 to 5 seconds, I move on. Another one that works well is what Raduga calls phantom wiggling, and you may have heard of this. This is just trying to move a non-physical body part. So let's say you try to move a non-physical finger or foot or something, and if at any point that sensation becomes real and it feels like you're really moving a body part, stick with it, keep doing it. Otherwise, you move on. Personally, I would modify this technique just a little bit, and I wouldn't call it phantom wiggling. I would call it phantom flailing. Now, I say that because just like with building this habit, this intent in the first place, where you've really got to put all of your effort and all of your focus and all of your intent into it, and you can't do it half-heartedly, a phantom wiggle of a finger really feels half-hearted to me, and I've never been successful doing that. For me, the wiggling motion really works better as a flailing motion, really just swinging my arms back and forth or really swimming vigorously through the water or something like that where I am really just putting all of my effort and energy into this movement, into this non-physical movement. And if I can do that, at least half the time, this sensation suddenly becomes real and can lead to the vibrations and I can get out. So try phantom wiggling. I would append to that. Try phantom flailing. I think it works better. And one more, and I've got this this one from William Buellman. This one actually works really well for me as well. I've used it a few times recently. And this is reach for a location that you're not physically capable of reaching. So personally, what I do is I reach for the carpet on my floor. Now this is a good 3 feet below where my hand is, hanging off the edge of the bed. And even if I were to hang my arm off the bed, I still can't quite reach the carpet. So I will focus on stretching and reaching and reaching and reaching for that carpet. And if there's a point where I can run my fingers through the carpet, then that's a non-physical sensation. It's an easy signpost to say continue. Continue with what you're doing. And if I can run my fingers through the carpet, I start grabbing at the carpet. And if I can grab at the carpet, I'll start shoving my hands into the carpet and into the floor, and I start feeling the inside of the floor. And usually by the time I get to about to that point, the vibrations will kick in and I can roll out. All right, so those are movement-based. The last category I would call other, the other category. And these are a little bit harder to describe. And I think that Raduga really had a hard time describing these as well, because he claims that they work incredibly well in his book, but his description of them is very lacking, to the point where it was frustrating for months while I tried to figure out what the heck he was talking about. And he calls these two particular methods straining. So straining your brain, for instance. And he says, you got to strain your brain. You don't have muscles in your brain, but you got to strain it. And so I thought, I don't know how to do that. I looked on other forums. I found other people who were frustrated by his lack of information on how to strain your brain. And after months of trying different things, I actually accidentally stumbled across, I think, what he's talking about. So I'm going to try to describe it a little bit better here in case anybody else has run across his description and been equally frustrated by it. So for me, what it feels like is, for those of you who are into any sort of gymnastics, picture standing on your head or doing a headstand, or even just hang your head down between your legs and let the blood flow into your head. And you start to feel this pressure inside your head. Now, once you feel that pressure, imagine what it would feel like to pulsate that pressure, almost like you've got a heartbeat in your head, and it's pulsating stronger and weaker and stronger and weaker. Now, keep in mind, this is non-physical. This is all creative visualization type stuff, and you're not really trying to force blood into your head when you're doing this, but I'm trying to describe what this sensation feels like. Now, when I actually perform this technique, I'll feel the pressure of my pillow behind my head. So that's a real physical sensation. And I try to imagine what it would feel like if that pressure on the back of my head were to push itself forward, extend itself forward, and expand to fill the entire inside of my skull. And then I will start strobing that sensation on the inside of my head. And it's still going to take some practice, I understand. It's a strange thing to think about, doing any sort of straining of a non-muscle type organ. But give that a try, because when I'm able to do that, 9 times out of 10, it'll kick off the vibrations. If I can get that sensation to feel real, and I can really feel that pulsating pressure, those vibrations come very quickly. So the last one, straining your body without straining your muscles. Now this one, I'd like to say I advise against it. Go ahead and give it a try, but really the reason why I don't recommend it is because it's very similar to straining your brain. So first of all, I think that is effective enough. But second of all, it's very easy to do that one wrong. Straining your brain, you can't do it wrong, right? There's no muscles in your brain to strain, so if you're feeling something, you're doing it correctly. With straining your body without moving a muscle, it's very easy to accidentally tense an arm or tense a leg or tense your stomach or something. It's very easy to tense a physical muscle while you're trying to induce this non-physical sensation. So I've tried this, and it never fails that when I review my body from head to toe and I really try to evaluate whether I'm fully relaxed or not, I find, oh, I've got an arm that's tensed, or my leg is tensed. And it's because I'm trying to strain my body without using a muscle, but it's very, very natural to actually strain a muscle while you're doing that. So give it a try if you're interested. If that doesn't work for you, stick with straining the brain, because it's very difficult to do that wrong. If you feel anything, you're doing it right. All right, so like I said, pick a number of techniques, 4 or 5. You're going to run through these cycles as soon as you wake up. When you wake up, don't move. Immediately turn your focus to projecting, and then just start going through these cycles of techniques, 1 every 3 to 5 seconds. You're going to stop if you ever feel any non-physical sensations. I'm sorry, don't stop. You're going to not stop if you feel any non-physical sensations. You're going to stop rotating. You're going to stick with that technique that provided you with those sensations. And if it stops working, if that technique suddenly becomes less effective, then you're going to switch to the next one and continue on. All right, so these techniques, they provide a couple of different things. They provide you a signpost to tell you I'm getting closer, because you start to feel non-physical sensations. You know that you're getting closer to that borderland state where you can successfully project. And second, once they have starting to work, um, usually they will actually turn into that vibrational state, which for me is a prerequisite to getting out. So that is the indirect method in a nutshell. And now I know this might be a whole lot of new information for a lot of you out there, because this is, like I said, not one that is regularly talked about. So please, if anything is unclear, or if I didn't explain something well, or you want me to go into more detail, please let me know. Feel free to comment, ask questions. I'd love to hear your suggestions on other methods to train your body into having this reflex, because for me that alarm method worked. Um, but being that the intent and will method did not, I'm sure the alarm method maybe won't work for everybody. So any other suggestions or ideas are definitely welcome. Um, as always, I've got my blog below, in a link below. I've written out this entire thing in text, so you can go through and review this again, because it's a lot of new information probably. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, help me build this community, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a good one.